Well, so I do actually remember several months ago posting one or two things about this on my Telegram channel, probably around about the time it came out or thereabouts after. I never really looked too much further into it as the months came to end 2024, but I did make reference in a tiny wee video that I posted out on New Year's Day that I had read through the PDFs, and I would come back to said PDFs at a wee bit of a later date to speak about them briefly. But just for anybody that never watched that video, uh, or if they didn't know what I was speaking about, just to give you a wee brief summarization, September the 22nd, 2024, the United Nations released this press release on their own website titled "The United Nations Adopts Groundbreaking Pact for the Future to Transform Global Governance," right? World leaders today adopted a pact for the future that includes a global digital compact and a declaration on future generations. This pact is the culmination of an inclusive years long process to adapt international cooperation to the realities of today and the challenges of tomorrow, the most wide ranging international agreement in many years, covering entirely new areas as well as issues in which agreement has not been made possible in decades. The Pact aims above all else to ensure that international institutions can deliver in the face of a world that has changed dramatically since they were created. Overall, the agreement of the Pact is a strong statement of countries' commitment to the UN or the United Nations, whatever, the international system and international law, with leaders setting out a clear vision of an international system that can deliver on its promises, is more representative of today's world, and draws on the energy and expertise of governments, civil society, and other key partners. And then, of course, we've got a lovely little quote here. The Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration of Future Generations, opens the door to new opportunities and untapped possibilities, the Secretary General said during his remarks at the opening of the Summit of the Future. Who else was a part of the opening Summit of the Future, if you will share this tab very briefly? Our very own Foreign Secretary. A reformed multilateral system for peace and prosperity. The Foreign Secretary's speech at the UN Summit of the Future. Big Bad David Lammy. I stand here as a man of multiple identities. A Londoner, a patriotic Brit, a lawyer, and a proud African. Okay. you get you get the drift in that regard. Anyway, and so it goes on to talk about security, peace, of course. We've also got, as it says here, include what's it say? The most progressive and concrete commitment to Security Council reform since the 1960s, with plans to improve the effectiveness and representativeness of the council, including by redressing the historical underrepresentation of Africa as a priority. They go on to speak about like nuclear disarmament, etc. Then it says down here, though, on sustainability or sustainable development, climate and financing for development, the entire pact is designed to turbocharge implementation of the sustainable development goals. So we had the decade of action in 2020, which, and I remember making videos about it back in 2020, the decade of action, the United Nations announced the decade of action, which was basically the acceleration of the implementation or the Sustainable Development Goals, the acceleration of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in order for us all to reach our targets by 2030. Now, 5 years into said decade, what are we getting? Oh, we're going to turbocharge the implementation. So it's no longer about acceleration, it's turbocharging. Giving developing countries a greater say in how decisions are taken at international level. Reviewing the sovereign debt architecture, etc., accelerating measures to address the challenge of climate change, including through delivering more finance to help countries adapt, improving how we measure human progress, going beyond GDP to capture human and well-being and sustainability. Hmm. Hmm. Where have we heard that before? Where have we heard this before? It's not like the Scottish government, the SNP, if you want to, whatever you want to call them. I've been talking about a well-being economy for a few years now. Nicola Sturgeon even had a TED talk speaking specifically about it. There's even an alliance with several countries or governments around the world forming this sort of well-being economy governance network, as they refer to it as, where it says here on the Scottish Government's own website, just very briefly, Wellbeing Economy Monitor, right? Wellbeing is at the heart of our national purpose as a country, underpinning our national performance framework and reflected in our national outcomes and indicators. The National Strategy for Economic Transformation commits us to taking a broader view of what it means to be a successful economy, society, and country, looking beyond traditional attitudes and measures of prosperity, such as GDP, and putting people and the environment at the heart of our economy. While we acknowledge that traditional economic metrics remain internationally recognized and we will continue to produce them, they cannot and shouldn't be viewed in isolation. Our well-being economy, well-being economy, focusing on human, planetary well-being and sustainability. It's almost like clockwork. On climate change, confirmation of the need to keep global temperatures rise to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels and to transition away from fossil fuels into energy systems to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And again, I could refer to the UK and or the Scottish government. And what do? They bang on to no end about the needs to move away from fossil fuels. Been a bit of a pattern here, don't you think? And of course, they talk about digital or the Digital Compact. Annexed to the Pact is the first comprehensive global framework for digital cooperation and AI governments. And I think that is where I will briefly start on this because it's somewhat creepy in nature. You mean, they really do. They really do have it all figured out. This is one of like the PDFs that they've got relating to this specific topic. And just in the section of digital identification or digital IDs, whatever, I mean, digital IDs linked with, and this is all related to the Sustainable Development Goals, just for anybody that's not aware, right? Obviously, there's 17 of these goals. This is number one. Digital IDs linked with bank or mobile money accounts can improve the delivery of social protection coverage and serve to better reach eligible beneficiaries. Digital technologies may help to reduce leakage, errors, and cost in the design of social protection programs, right? And they really do have it all figured out. Drone technology, of course, in this particular instance, can monitor crops, provide information on how much water is needed, etc. Novel platform-based vaccine technologies and smart vaccine manufacturing techniques help to produce greater numbers of higher quality vaccines. On the Sustainable Development Goal 10.7, you should look into if you've never, by the way, but just then, digital public goods and applications such as money are enabling access to financial and other services for all members of society, including women and girls, rural communities, and displaced people. Information and communication, technology solutions can help to cut nearly 10 times more carbon dioxide than they emit. Digital technologies combined with ecological design can help to reduce natural resources and other materials used, etc. Right, so there's a lot about this digital compact. If gender equality connectivity enables women and girls to access information and communicate for their safety and development, it can allow girls to access support services, learn about sexual and reproductive health. Lovely stuff, lovely chapply, lovely. That's what we all need. Yeah, lovely. It goes on and on and on. But then we come to this is our common policy agenda briefing. All right, we have committed to applying human rights online. And to putting in place specific measures to protect people and communities, in particular women, children, and young people and older persons, persons with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, and ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities. Oh my God. However, in every society around the world, harm is rampant. Open, safe, and secure use of the internet is slipping away from us, potentially permanently. Government shutdowns off the internet, data fueled, if you're a dick. State surveillance and predatory business models pose serious risks to human rights. Disinformation, hate speech, and malicious criminal activity in cyberspace raise the risks and costs for everybody online. So the super sweet, superhero-esque United Nations has processed addressing cybersecurity, um, and have identified norms of responsible state behavior to help safeguard peace and security online, and are exploring confidence and capacity building measures to advance them. States are also exploring legally binding arrangements to tackle criminal threats, as well as the capacity for governments and judiciaries to counter, investigate, and prosecute and educate on cybercrime. Regions and states are putting in place legislation for online safety. Some digital platforms are investing resource in better detecting and responding to an online abuse, and curricula are being introduced to develop digital literacy or literate citizens. Oh, this is even better. Digitally literate citizens capable of critically thinking and taking protective action. Right, you are. Right, you are. Anyway, a digital compact or a global digital compact would articulate a shared vision of an open, free, secure, and human centered digital future that rests on the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and drumroll please, of course, 2030 Agenda 21 repackaged. The purpose of the compact would be to advance multi-stakeholder cooperation, sorry, in order to achieve this vision. It would articulate shared principles and objectives and identify concrete actions for their implementation, establishing a global framework for bringing together and leveraging existing digital cooperation processes to support dialogue and collaboration among regional, national, industrial, and expert organizations and platforms according to their respective mandates and competencies, and facilitate new governance arrangements where needed. Okay. So, this is crackpot material. The compact would be initiated and led by member states with the full participation of other stakeholders. There's always other stakeholders, you know. Its implementation would be open to all relevant stakeholders, which you'll probably never hear about, or who they are, even, including digital platforms, private sector actors, digital technology focused coalitions, and civil society organizations, endorsing its principles and objectives and committing to the alignment of the respective policies and practices. With these would be requirements for its participation in its implementation. Lots of big words, isn't it lovely? Isn't it lovely? That's so bold and progressive. Yes, isn't it just? I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on, but I encourage people to go through this seriously. Just add quickly as well on this that I propose the following objectives, right? And it goes on and on and on and on. And you get to this one. Develop robust accountability criteria and standards for digital platforms and users to address disinformation, hate speech, and other harmful online content. Yes, that's what we need. That's what we need. Then we come to the Pact for the Future PDF, which is 64 pages. But as I say, feel free to go and read through most of it yourself. But I'll just point out a few things very briefly. We, the heads of state and government representing the peoples of the world, have gathered at the UN's headquarters to protect the needs and interests of present and future generations through the actions in this Pact for the Future. Okay. Goes on down here to say that this is a moment of hope and opportunity. Global transformation is a chance for renewal and progress grounded in our common humanity. Advances in knowledge, science, technology, and innovation could deliver a breakthrough to a better and more sustainable future for all. Believing that there is a path to a brighter future for all humanity, including those living in poverty and vulnerable situations. Through the actions we take today, we resolve to set ourselves on that path, striving for a world that is safe, peaceful, just, equal, inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous. A world in which well-being, there's that word again, security and dignity and a healthier planet are assured for all humanity. We also reaffirm that the three pillars of the United Nations, sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights are equally important, interlinked, and mutually reinforcing. We cannot have one without the others. They also say here that they recognize that sustainable development in all its three dimensions is a central goal in itself, and that its achievement, leaving no one behind, another S&P phrase, by the way, I wonder where they got that from, is always, will always be a central objective of multilateralism. Dearie, dearie me. We will urgently accelerate progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through concrete political steps and mobilizing significant additional financing from all sources for sustainable development, with special attention to the needs of those in special situations and creating opportunities for young people. Ah, the youth. Political grooming, as I refer to quite often. I wonder where that comes from, too. It's almost as if, hear me out here, it's almost as if our puppetry, the pantomime, the puppetry that we see within the walls of our ugly as fuck Scottish Parliament. It's almost as if it's not organic. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time, with adverse impacts that are disproportionately felt by developing countries, especially those that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. We commit to accelerate meeting our obligations under the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement to live up to our foundational promise to protect succeeding generations from the scourge of war. We must abide by international law. We recognize that our efforts to redress injustice and to reduce inequalities within and between countries to build peaceful, just, inclusive societies cannot succeed unless we step up our efforts to promote tolerance, embrace diversity, and combat all forms of discrimination, including racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and all the abhorrent contemporary forms and manifestations. And of course, all of these could have will certainly be attributed to disinformation, misinformation, or hate online. And it just so happens they've got a digital compact, etc., that they're wishing to sort of allow to trickle down into the political echelons of our so-called sovereign nations. None of our goals can be achieved without the full, safe, and equal and meaningful participation and representation of all women in political and economic life, reaffirming our commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to accelerating our goals to achieve gender equality, women's participation, and the empowerment of our women and girls. Isn't that sweet? Bold and progressive. But in order to do that, you're just literally by default shafting other people, but hey ho. And of course, you get some of the proverbial verbiage that you would have seen if you ever read the Global Compact on Migration, such as maximizing the positive contribution of migrants to the sustainable development of origin, transit, destination, and host countries, and strengthen international partnerships and global cooperation for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Addressing the drivers of irregular migration and ensure the safety, dignity, and human rights of all migrants, regardless of their migration status. Protect and promote the human rights and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as interrelated and mutually reinforcing, while recognizing that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development contains a pledge to leave no one behind and envisages a world of universal respect for promotion of human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, and justice, etc. Let me see what else it says here relating to migration. Do we have any more? Develop and undertake a national digital inclusion surveys with data disaggregated by income, blah, 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 blah. Right, okay. And we'll come to the climate stuff in just a second. Just want to see if there's any more on that. Or what about hate? Yeah, misinformation, because I'm sure there was some stuff in this from memory. Misinformation. We got address the risk to sustaining peace posed by disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech and content inciting harm, including content disseminated through digital platforms, while respecting the right to freedom of expression and to privacy and ensuring unhindered access to the internet in accordance with international law. Okay. We must urgently counter and address all forms of violence, including sexual and gender-based violence, which occurs through or is amplified by the use of technology, all forms of hate speech and discrimination, misinformation and disinformation, cyberbullying, and child sexual exploitation. Sort of sounds like that bill they were trying to pass here not too long ago in the UK. the Online Harms Bill. We will work together to promote information integrity, tolerance, and respect in the digital space, as well as to protect the integrity of democratic processes. We will strengthen the international cooperation to address the challenges of misinformation and disinformation and hate speech online, and mitigate the risks of information manipulation in a manner consistent with international law. That's what we got. Design and roll out digital media information literacy curricula to ensure that all users have the skills and knowledge to safely and critically interact with content and with information providers and enhance resilience against the harmful impacts of misinformation. Okay. Provide and promote and facilitate access and dissemination of independent, fact-based, timely, targeted, clear, accessible, multilingual, and science-based information to counter misinformation and disinformation. Yeah. You know that old question you often hear, like, who are the arbiters of truth when truth is being questioned? It's the United Nations in this particular instance. Encourage United Nations entities in collaboration with governments and relevant stakeholders to assess the impact of misinformation and disinformation on the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we got here? Call on social media platforms to provide researchers access to data with safeguards for user privacy to ensure transparency and accountability to build an evidence base on how to address misinformation and disinformation and hate speech that can inform government and industrial policies, standards, and best practices. Lovely stuff. Lovely people, aren't they? So progressive. Let me see very briefly. A lot of references to climate, but they say here, just briefly, we will achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls as a crucial contribution to progress against or across, all the Sustainable Development Goals. We will strengthen our actions to address climate change. Of course, you fucking will. Yeah. We will accelerate the reform of the international finance architecture so that it can meet the urgent challenge of climate change. Climate change is apparently one of the greatest challenges of our time. I don't agree. I really don't. I'm sorry. Let's see what it says, though. We will strengthen our actions to address climate change. We are deeply concerned at the current slow pace of progress in addressing climate change. We're deeply concerned at the continued growth from greenhouse gas emissions. And we recognize the importance of the means of implementation and support for developing countries. Let's see what else we've got. Reaffirm the Paris Agreement temperature of holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius is above pre-industrial levels and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 Celsius. Ooh, spooky stuff. So spooky. The reality of the matter is, though, even like a video that I'm putting out right here where I'm just sort of highlighting like some of the stuff they're referring to here. Reality of the matter is, right? As I say, I would highly encourage people to go and like look up this stuff themselves. And they keep talking about like misinformation and whatnot, right? Because I've spoke about it in a somewhat skeptical manner, that would probably be tarred under those brushes, misinformation, disinformation, etc., etc. I'm hindering progress. I'm anti-science. But it's not difficult to sort of tie or connect some dots together in this respect, where you're seeing our government's referring to leaving no one behind, sustainability this, sustainability that, climate change this, climate change that, online harms bill this, hate speech bills that, etc., etc. When you start to connect some dots here, it's not really that too difficult to sort of propose and or hypothesize that maybe, just maybe, our governments are not working organically, they're working in tandem, and maybe, just maybe, you could potentially hypothesize that they are reading from scripts passed down to them from the very people who punted out the PDFs that I just fucking read through. Maybe, just maybe, to conclude, you could hypothesize that maybe the direction of travel that we're headed in is that if you're not on board with the sustainable gravy train, then you're part of the problem. And maybe, just maybe, that's why PDFs like that exist. I don't know. Fit for thought, eh? Anyway. Peace.